Welcome to the Ignorance is Strength Podcast. I'm your host, Fabian motherfucking Ojeda, and I don't know shit, but that's okay. All right, let's get the shit started. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Ignorance is Strength Podcast. Hope you enjoyed episode number 40, the aptly titled Shit Show. Definitely going to invite those guys back on for episode number 50. You know, it's a classic. And speaking of classics, we're going to speak today to a brand new guest about a classic singer, right? And so I'd like to welcome first-time guest to the podcast, Tori from the Chicana Chisme Podcast. How are you doing today, Tori?
What's going on? I'm good. How are you?
Good. Definitely. I saw your profile on Instagram. We were talking about the Selena series, and it's funny enough. That's something I really wanted to talk to somebody about and put it on the podcast. So when I saw your post, I'm like, I'm gonna invite her on the podcast, see if she's open to have a conversation about that. Because it's kind of, I like to invite a lot of my friends on the podcast, and none of them have seen the series.
Okay.
So I'm like, it'll give me a little bit of an opportunity to kind of compare the two, the series and the movie. Now, from what I understand from listening to your podcast, right? You initially didn't want to watch the series.
That's correct.
Did you end up watching the series?
No, I still haven't seen it actually.
Okay, so I listened to a good chunk of the first episode you did on the Selena series. What's maybe like the rationale behind why you wouldn't want to watch it?
My main thing at first was just kind of like, okay, let her live already, guys. Especially being here in Texas. I mean. Selena's a nonstop thing. We have the gas station sell cups. We have, the Selena for a mile. I don't think they had it this past year, but she has like a festival down here in Corpus where she's from. I mean, Selena is a constant thing that we see all the time, and I was just kind of like, one, I was not impressed with the cast that they chose. And I know that, of course, you're never going to find people that look exactly like those people, right? But I was just kind of like, this is like the Wish version of, what they could have done with the series. Mm-hmm. And I've seen other bio topics that, the people obviously don't look like them. They look familiar, or they just kind of have like a characteristic that kind of looks like them. But I just felt like it was so poorly done. Like the wigs looked shitty, and I know people are like, it was the 80s, the hair was crap. And I'm like, no, homeboy that plays Chris looks like a Davy Crockett raccoon hat on his head. Like he looks crazy, right? So just like a combination of those things, like I said, being from Texas, we see Selena stuff all the time. And I would say, hijo, otra vez, like, shit, man, let her breathe, like it's just always something. And, I mean, I love that they're keeping her alive and introducing her to a more modern audience. But I just kind of felt like they could have either done it better or almost like, I don't know. To me, after seeing all these years, I'm like, okay, let her rest already, right? So I think it's just a combination of all those things.
Okay, now there's a lot right off the bat there, even to just pick at right there, because you mentioned the cast, right? And I agree. I'm like, you see the memes all the time, like this is what exactly, almost like you said it. This is like the Amazon version, which was in the movie with Jennifer Lopez and everything. And this is the Wish version, and you get what's her name, Christian Serrato. Yeah, and I agree. The girl looks nothing like Selena. I mean, did she play the part well? I believe so. That's a different story. But yeah, it's just I don't know what they were thinking with casting. Who do you think would have been a more suitable Selena?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I honestly didn't even know who Christian Serratos was until people were like, "Oh, she's on Walking Dead," which I've heard of it. I never seen it, so I was like, "Okay." And I did hear that she played her very well.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, to me, I felt like they whitewashed a lot because like the little girl, especially, she had a nice voice, but like if anybody's ever seen, Selena as a younger girl, she was a darker girl. She had, that kinky, wavyish, frizzy hair.
Mm-hmm.
Like she looked like she just crossed the border. Like she was dark. She looked like a
Right.
Mexican, And so I was kind of like, I think the little girl that played her in Selena played resembled her better. And then even Kristen Serratos, I feel like they kind of toned down her features.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so and I know that a lot of people said, that J Lo got the same crap, especially because she's Puerto Rican.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, I felt she fit her better.
Yeah.
So I mean, again, this is just my opinion, but that's how I felt about it. But
Yeah.
yeah, as far as who I think would have been a good actress, man, I really don't know. Nobody I can really think of at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's kind of hard to, even though J-Lo was a Puerto Rican actress portraying a Mexican woman, it was kind of hard to top that role right there, right? I
Yeah, I
mean,
think she did a great job.
mhm. I think she definitely she filled the part well. Now you mentioned too, being uh from Texas, and I imagine being like a young girl in Texas when like Selena was at the height of her popularity must have been different than someone like, I don't know. I grew up in California. I didn't really, and that wasn't really my style of music. My mom would listen to it and everything, but
Mhm.
you know, I think for me in California, she kind of became more of a legend after the fact, after she died and whatnot,
Right.
right? But what was that like, growing up a fan of hers? I did listen to your podcast, and I know you were a fan of hers, right? Growing up, when she was reaching the height of her popularity.
Right. Granted, I was very young. I think I was like 8 years old when she passed away. So I don't have an extremely vivid memory, but I do remember, because I was always real close with my grandparents and all they listened to was Tejano. So, we heard her on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
Here in San Antonio, we have a festival called Fiesta, and it's like 2 weeks, and it's nothing but like, everybody listening to Tejano music, partying, jamming out. So
Mm-hmm.
Tejano music is very prevalent here. It's kind of like it's like an everyday thing. It's almost like something you don't even think about.
Mm-hmm.
But it was somebody that I looked up to. She was I think 23 at that time. And to see somebody that was so beautiful and who had it together, and I honestly didn't really understand her impact until I got older, because
Mm-hmm.
San Antonio, just like in certain areas of California, the majority of the population is Hispanic. So you don't even really know the difference because everybody looks like you
Right.
around where you're from, right? So it's not until I got older and I left Texas that I realized those inspirations, how much they meant to other people who don't have a Hispanic majority that they're constantly around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and me growing up, again, I wasn't like a huge fan or anything like that. I was like a little kid as well. I think when she died, I was like 9 years old. So I can't pinpoint like where she, where I was when she died. I was probably just in, what, third grade, fourth grade, something like that. You know, but growing up, again after the fact, after she, after the movie, and I think that really kind of solidified her legend a bit. I think
Mhm.
that they did capture, what was special about her through that. But after that, I think people started kind of, getting on board with it and being like, you know what, she was kind of something, something special to us brown people,
Right.
because you're right. You don't really have something to point to like in, mainstream rock at all times, or mainstream pop, you
Hmm.
know and she was getting there. She was cut off right at the infancy of her, mainstream US push, but I think she was popular enough and enough ours to kind of, where people can look back and relate, and having conversations with people at work where we're like, yeah, she was like a national treasure. It's like it's pretty cool to still be able to do that, decades later.
Right.
You know? But what do you, I mean, since you hadn't seen the series, what did you think about the movie?
The movie, I loved it. So like you were saying, you don't really remember. I remember exactly where it was when I remember she passed away. And I don't know how far in to my episode you heard, but I mentioned that I actually tried out for the little girl
I heard that part.
in the
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really good. You know, I remember bawling my little eyes out. And it's so funny because something that I also mentioned was that I hated J Lo for the longest time because I always felt like, people associated her with Selena because, they didn't know the actual Selena. They just saw the movie and they, associated that, at the time they did look pretty close, look wise. And then, J Lo got popular off of that. So I think
Mhm.
when everybody thought Selena, they thought J Lo. So I was like, that's not Selena. She's not even Mexican.
Uh-huh.
But I still to this day think the movie's good. I could probably recite it front and back.
Uh-huh. And I think though that also, I mean, if you look at it, I believe that propelled J-Lo's career into, her trying out music because before that, I think she didn't really do music, right? She was just like more so an actress and,
Right,
you
and a
know,
dancer, yeah.
mhm. So that I mean, I think that you know, that made her a bigger star as well. So she kind
Right.
of rode the coattails a little bit of Selena's legacy.
Oh, 100%. What I do like though is that she never fails to mention um how much of an impact Selena had on her career. And I've
Mhm.
always liked that. Like she understands the impact of playing Selena and what that meant to a lot of the Hispanic communities. So I've always appreciated that of her throughout the years, that she's always mentioned how close to her heart her playing that role always was.
Yeah, for sure. Now, when the movie came out, I mean, to looking back at it now, right, in retrospect, as I wanted to do a little bit of research on it. Um, she died in '93. The movie was out 2 years later.
Right.
So that means they must have filmed immediately after her death,
Yeah.
right? And so that's a little bit, daunting there to think like, the mourning period has passed so quickly that, they must have gone into production like literally like months after she died, right? What do you think
Right.
about that?
Again, I was little, so I didn't think about it. But now that I'm older, it definitely explains why so many people think the quintanillas are money hungry. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, um, I'm sure that at the same time they kind of wanted to keep her momentum alive because it was somewhat fresh.
Mm-hmm.
And since they did have so many plans for her, I think maybe they kind of thought that that would be a way of honoring her, continuing her legacy that she herself didn't get to continue.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're right. They probably did start maybe a year or so later after she passed because it does take quite a bit of time for movies. And then I know they had auditions everywhere because they had auditions for the younger and older Selena here in San Antonio. I think they had it in a couple other areas between Mexico and all the border states,
Mm-hmm.
California included, I believe. So, all of that takes time. It's not like it just happened overnight and they made the movie.
Right.
Um, so, yeah, now that not looking back on it now, I'm kind of like, oh, okay, I could kind of see where they got that, but
Mm-hmm.
that's definitely something I didn't realize at the time.
Right. Now, again, go kind of jumping back to the series, um, I always hear, and I don't know why or where it's coming from, but there's some controversy around it, right? Like, is there some sort of controversy of whether there's any representation, like fair representation or anything like that, or what are some controversies you've heard around that, if any?
When me and one of my friends felt like that because her and I are very big into the Hispanic community. We're fully aware of what's going on. And at the time, we saw a lot of people like, oh, it's about time, oh, representation, this, that, and the other. And, granted, like Texans are just a subset of all the Mexican Americans in America in general.
Mm-hmm.
And people were like, oh, we got to support it because Hispanics and blah, blah, blah. And, when me and one of my friends were like, seriously, like there's a million other Hispanic shows on TV that no one's even like paying attention to. There's like On My Block, there was the Ashley Garcia show, that where she was a genius. That show, that was super cute. It was a Disney show. There was East Los High on Hulu. Um, there, um, All in the Family, Jane the Virgin. There's tons of stuff out there that we were kind of like, what do you mean there's no representation? Like, there's tons of us. There's been tons of shows. There was Devious Maids that had 5 different Latina stars. So we were just kind of like, really, guys? Like, what do you mean there's no representation? We've obviously, not as much as there is in the majority of TV shows and whatnot, but it's definitely not that we don't have that representation. I think it's just because they saw a name that they knew and they jumped on it. So for her and I, who are our eyes are open to those things, we were kind of like, are you serious? What do you mean there's no representation? Like, there's tons. You guys just don't have your eyes open, right? So to us, we were kind of like, what do you mean? Like, what? Okay.
I can get on board with that. I think, I might be one of the people that sometimes has my eyes closed to it, because I saw, like the Selena series, and immediately I thought it was, whoa, cool. Like, I've been, that's something that I've been wanting to watch for a while, because I heard about it for so long. But you're right. There is so much out there. And I think, I don't know if Netflix is, drawing the line between catering to and pandering, but they have a lot of stuff about, the Hispanic culture, like on Netflix now, Yeah,
no, they really do. And they have, like, every single character in the Selena series has been on their own series. Like Gabriel Chavarria, who plays A.B. Quintanilla, the young one, he was on East Los High. Julio Macias, who plays Pete Astudillo, he was Spooky in On My Block. Christian Serratos was on The Walking Dead. The one who plays AB, he was on Jane the Virgin. He was on Desperate Housewives. So they're not unknown actors.
Yeah, and it's like I've noticed with Netflix, they've been throwing a lot more out there for us. And again, I don't know if that's to kind of like, like cater to, the viewers, because there's a lot more of us now, or if it's kind of more pandering. Like, you have the shows like the Taco Chronicles and stuff like that. You have like the documentary that they did about like rock en español, right? I think it was called like Break It Down or Tear It Down or something like that. It was really good. I liked it. I enjoyed it. But I don't know if that's like intentional, or I don't know. It's got to be. They've got to be like, look, this is our demographic. This is we've got to hit, and they just seem to be pumping more and more content out that's geared toward us.
Yeah, I think honestly they're pumping a lot of things out just for diversity in general. Like, I don't know if you saw that one movie. It was called Call Me Be My Maybe, and it's the 2 Asians.
Yes, yeah.
Super cute. It wasn't like it was about Asians, but it wasn't Asian centered. It was like 2 people that falling in love that so happened to have been Asian. Not this is an Asian film. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's been a lot more stuff, surrounding the Black community. I have a whole list of shows that are literally like all just Black shows. So I think it really is. They're just trying to be more diverse in general, because they see that there's a want for it.
Okay. Well, yeah, that kind of puts to rest in my head a little bit the whole, are they just pandering to us? Because in the back of my head, I'm just like, I'm like, man, every other like show or documentary release is about something, Hispanic or something, Mexican, even the Richard Ramirez thing you just released,
Yeah, but don't forget, they also tailor your Netflix to what you watch.
True. Yeah.
So it could just be like, they're like, oh, this is what they like. Okay, cool. Because I've seen other people's Netflix, and I'm like, I've never seen any of those movies on my Netflix account, and vice versa. So I think it's definitely what people are looking for. But I totally understand what you mean.
Yeah, definitely. That means I got to stop sharing my Netflix account.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
You're like, what are you watching?
No, but there's also another controversy. I don't know if you heard about this one with the Selena series, but the original producer for the movie, he was kind of pushing back against the series because there was some sort of handshake agreement that he had with Abraham Quintanilla for the rights of Selena's life, right?
Right.
And so he wanted to block the series, and I just so happened to actually I know him because I used to work at a school that he founded. The guy, I believe it. When
Gregory Nava?
No,
right?
Esparza Matsuma.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah, so he and then I just looked it up. He was also listed as a producer for the series, but that was on, I don't know if they finally caved in and let him have a part of it, or if it was just kind of a, like a money thing,
Maybe either or. I think it's kind of like, hey, this was a great movie. Like, why are you gonna try to remake it?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I did see that too. That they were kind of like, hey, we had these rights, but it's a hit or miss with her family. I think to me, if I was her brother and sister, I'd be like, look, I love my sister, but I wouldn't want to have my life centered around my sister. And would I want to keep her legacy going? Of course, but I don't think that I would want my whole life to revolve around hers in regards to, like, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. You're trying to keep the legacy alive without staying stuck in her shadow.
Right. Yeah. So I'm always so surprised when they keep doing things, because I'm just kind of like, aren't you guys kind of tired of being in that, being in that shadow?
In that
I don't know.
bubble,
That's
yeah.
just me,
Mm-hmm. And I think you're right, though, because you haven't really seen the family kind of break out into anything else. Somebody like AB, who's a super talented musician,
Right.
and that's one thing that I was going to mention about the TV show, the series, Netflix series, that I do like, is that they kind of explore more the family, the bandmates, a lot more detail than the movie did. The movie kind of gives you a grand synopsis of it all. Like, if you didn't know anything about Selena, they give you the 2-hour tourniqueted version. Like, this is what it is,
Right.
and
they give you the bread and butter.
Mm-hmm, and it's beginning, middle, and end, but I do like so far what I've seen in the series, where they're kind of delving more into, like, like I said, the family, the band, the music itself, and like you're completely right. Somebody like AB, he's like I said, he's super talented, but he's not broken free from that shadow. I mean,
Right.
he's kind of had his own success, but not anywhere near the point where it should be, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because he was very successful with the Cumbia Kings for a while. I mean, we all know the right? Like when you hear it at a quinceañera or something. And he's definitely, done broken out a lot of producing. And I mean, he's credit for a lot of, people like Frankie J started with the Cumbia Kings, DJ Kane started with the Cumbia Kings. So he's definitely, a contributor for being the core of all these other people who blossomed out,
Mm-hmm.
And he is a great producer. I think it's just, I'm not too sure. I definitely feel like he could have done more with, what he had going on, because he was a great producer. He was a great songwriter. Why he didn't blossom out, I kind of think a lot maybe has to do with their family trying to keep them amongst themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could be wrong. Obviously, I don't know. That's just my own opinion, because I definitely think he could have gone way further than he did. Not to mention, like, he's gone through like bankruptcy. He's been arrested for bad child support payments.
Yeah.
So I think it's just, but I really do think that their dad kind of has this like Selena leash on them, because I really feel like they could have done so much more had they not felt obligated to continue to do these things in her name.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense for sure. Have you I know you, I don't know if you touched on it a little bit on your podcast, but can you kind of compare and see kind of comparisons to like the Jackson family there?
Yeah, I mean, I would say extremely similar in the fact that, their dad wanted that discipline in them, and that he was very wary of who got close
Mm-hmm.
to the family. And I mean, even now, Abraham does little things here and there that makes everybody like, what's going on? There's another pretty big Tejano group called La Mafia.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know if you've heard them. You've probably heard songs, but they have actually been around even before Selena, and they
Mm-hmm.
were, in the talks of doing like some kind of like Spanish biopic or whatnot. And it was actually a couple days ago that Abraham wrote something on Facebook about that. How dare they make it seem like they're the ones who gave Selena her, you know, her first opportunities and this and this and that and one of like their old managers or somebody replied like, "What are you talking about? Selena's literally open for us." Like
Mm-hmm.
when we first came out,
Right.
and just little things like that where you can definitely tell that it's kind of like, bro, like she's not the only one in Tejano, like it's I understand it, but and it's almost like, are they just a devoted, supported family who wants to keep their sister and their daughter's legend, or is this, they know that this is a means of keeping money
Mm-hmm.
circulating, and of course everybody, of course would always want to honor their family, but there then they do little things like that makes you like, okay, this doesn't seem very sincere, and I feel like turns people off. I mean, people are going to buy Selena stuff regardless,
Mm-hmm.
so they don't give a shit whether the one or twosies want to buy their shit or not, because they
Right.
know everybody else is, right, because it's something
Mm-hmm.
that's going to bring in money. So it is definitely something that's kind of like sketch.
Yeah, no, for sure. That I mean, it's a combination of things. The dad's got to be an egomaniac, but at the same time, he's money hungry.
Right,
And
yeah.
Mhm.
And kind of that same concept with like Joe Jackson, I
Right.
mean, aside from maybe ones or twosies, and no family is perfect, but look how much dysfunction you've seen throughout the years with the Jackson family, like
Right.
Michael alone had all this like pedophilia controversy behind him, and honestly I think it's because he was so stuck in that mentality that he was as a young kid, where
Right.
he didn't even have the choice to be a young child, because he was so his sole purpose was to make this music,
Hmm. And
and
now
it kind of like fucked him up the rest of his life.
I'm gonna draw a parallel between the two families, and it might not be a very a nice parallel to draw because it can be controversial, but could it be due to the fact that both families were Jehovah's Witnesses? You know,
I
like I
actually hadn't thought about that actually.
Yeah, that's like an immediate comparison I thought of. Not to, I don't want to ever bash on anybody's religion or anything like that, but the Jehovah's Witnesses, they don't celebrate birthdays. They're very modest in things. It's all about discipline. You can't even listen to music most of the time.
Hmm.
But it's very strict, and a lot of what you see in cultures a lot of the time. When you're super strict like that, you do see a lot of the problems come out later on down the line, right? When these people are grown, like you did with Michael Jackson, right? Like you did maybe with like AB, right? He started to
Hmm.
get into some trouble. And you see it depicted in the series, the Selena series where she hadn't even gone on a Suzette hadn't even gone on a date when she was like in her 20s. She didn't
Hmm.
know what a date was. And that, I think, when you deprive people of natural human interaction like that, natural, what do you call it? Rites of passage like that. You do start to see some deviancy. You start to see some, weird kind of behavior from them later on down the line. And I wonder, not to foreshadow anything that could never happen, but I wonder if Selena would have seen a downfall later on down the line from all of this, all of these restrictions and all of this pressure and everything.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know much about Jehovah's Witnesses to say, what their guidelines or what their morals, ethic, tradition, boundaries are. But it definitely would make sense why they were so strict. But yeah, that 100%, makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, hopefully I don't get letters or emails from the Jehovah's Witnesses after this because they can't
Right.
come to my door anymore.
We just don't know enough to comment, guys. We promise. Um, I mean, it would make sense, but if that's the case, I feel like that's a little hypocritical, seeing as how, it seemed like, they did neither of them came off very religious in like the
Right.
sense of having like that humility and that empathy for one another, and that concern for their
Mm-hmm.
families. But again, I don't really know what exactly that religion consists of to be able to comment too much on that. But
Right, for sure.
that's an interesting I'm actually going to look that up later because now I'm kind of curious.
Yeah. Now, as far as I think one cool thing that we see in the movie and the series is that there's one actress who is in both,
Right.
and I always know her as like Mousy from
Mi vida
from
loca.
Mi Vida Loca, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What's her name? Sadie, is it Lopez, the last name?
I think so. I'm not 100%.
Yeah, but I was like, wait a minute, wasn't she in the first movie too? Because she was like the friend that went shopping with Selena, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so now she plays the mom in the series. So
Yes.
that's pretty cool, Um, I don't know if you've heard much about the performance of the guy who plays Abraham. I think he's much better, you know. I think that Edward James almost did a good job in the movie, but I think in the series, um, the guy I forget his name, but the guy who plays Abraham, he did a really good job making you think he's like just an evil jerk, you know.
Really, I would think that Edward James almost, I think he did a pretty good job. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious to see, what he did. But, I mean, I've heard good things about the actors in regards to, how they portrayed the people that they played, especially
Mhm.
for not having spent a lot of time with them or met them. From what I've heard, I think it's more so just the actual aesthetic of them not looking like them that kind of
Yeah.
like throws it off.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, I hope you'll give that the series a chance at some point. Really kind of check it out and see all the cool little nuances. They even talk about in one of the episodes, how I forget which album it was, but it was like a weird kind of like, desert background, and they put Selena in this ridiculous outfit with a headband, making her look
Oh
like
yes,
Middle
yes.
Eastern. And so they talk about the little things like that. Again, I mentioned they talk more about the band. They talk more about how the music came to be. You see AB putting it together in his head, getting influences from like different styles of music, like a little bit of disco, a little bit of reggae kind of went into the Tejano music and everything. I really enjoy all of that. But they also mention people you wouldn't have seen in the movie, like like Johnny Canales, comes out in the series, right? Or somebody portrays him, right?
Right.
And that's interesting to see because I'd always heard about that, but I never really saw that, like how Selena was always on the Johnny Canales show.
Yeah. It did. There's actually from what I've heard that there was, I think it was like the episode 3, that it actually showed a lot of like women that came before her. Actually, the group La Mafia that I just talked about, I think they're mentioned in one of those episodes. And aside from the podcast, I actually am an on-air personality at a Tejano station here in San Antonio. So
Okay,
I know
nice.
a lot of like the older bands, the older singers. So when they were telling me about it, and one artist in particular that I am personal friends with, she's on there. And so they were like, oh my gosh, you just see so and so, and I'm like, y'all know I didn't watch the show, you know damn well I didn't see so and so. But I thought was pretty cool that, at least they kind of gave a spotlight to the other people that, came before her or came
Mhm.
up at the same time as she did. So that I thought was pretty cool. I was like, okay, maybe I'll just watch that one episode. But so that, yeah, I did. I think and obviously, it's a movie. They're not going to be able to show any and everything in as much detail as they would in a series. So yeah, that is cool. And a lot of people in the Tejano industry that I've talked to in regards to this series, they have appreciated that too, because
Mhm.
that's our history that not everybody knows about. So yeah, definitely things like that are pluses that I've heard that are good about the show itself.
For sure. I'm very curious to see what they have left because I think time frame wise, where they leave off on the final episode of the first season, there is around 1993 ish. So a couple years before her death.
Hmm.
So I'm really curious to see what they have in the gas tank still. Um,
Yeah.
in the
I think that's when
movie,
she really started skyrocketing. So
yeah.
I'm sure that there was a lot going on within those couple of years, um, from point A to point Z, where she
Mhm.
was headed. So I can imagine there would have been quite a bit.
And so I wonder, like, if they're going to take a deeper look after her death as well. Because in the movie you didn't really see that. Just when she dies, that's pretty much the end of the movie.
Hmm.
I'm also curious to see if the new actress that plays Yolanda will get the same amount of hate as the one who played her in the movie. Because there's people who think Yolanda from the movie was like the real Yolanda, you
Right.
know, and she got like death threats and stuff like that. I still hate her for no reason. To this day, I can't trust any woman that looks like that or is named Yolanda. But
That's too funny. I'm actually curious who they're gonna pick. But no, that is funny. And that because that woman was in a lot of like Hispanic movies here and there,
mhm.
as like a small character. So that is kind of funny that you always kind of look at that one person. I mean, John Seda, the one who played Chris in the original movie, he's on one of like the SVUs or whatever. And I mean, every time I see him, I see Chris.
Yeah,
So
with
yeah,
that
that makes sense.
with that horrible voice, right? That's the one thing
Right.
about Chris from the movie. I'm like, dude, that voice was so annoying.
Yeah. He tried to like, I don't know what kind of accent he tried to
He
have,
he
but
tried to do kind of like a 1950s Pachuco accent or something, right?
yeah, he did.
Uh,
That's true. That's very
I'm
true.
like, that's terrible. You know, that's one thing I couldn't stand about the movie. Just that little
Right.
part, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I hope you'll at some point check it out, or if not, it is what it is. Let the legacy, uh, you know, stand on what it already is. Um, I'm always glad to see, like you're right. At some point they've got to just kind of let her be, right? But I actually am glad anytime I see any sort of Selena anything come out. Like I will immediately watch it. And that's me not even being a huge fan. That's me being a very casual fan.
Hmm.
I just think she was something special. She meant a lot to our community. And you could just relate. It's nostalgia, and you can relate to a lot of people. Just watching and discussing, the life and times of Selena.
Well, let me ask you this. Have you seen the right now I'm like obsessed with the Jenny Rivera series.
I've not, no.
It's
And
really, really good.
you know what? I think I'm going to watch that at some point. But it's kind of crazy because to me it hasn't had as much an impact because maybe because she wasn't like a crossover star or in the beginnings of being a crossover star like Selena was.
Yeah.
Watch music.
Well,
Mhm.
I think I'm sorry. Jenny Rivera was kind of like the Selena of banda. Like
Mhm.
unless you listen to that genre of music, you didn't really know. But Jenny Rivera was almost bigger than Selena. I mean, she sold
Yeah.
out the Staples Center,
Mhm.
and her story has way more twists and plots than
Yeah.
Selena's did. So I actually was pretty surprised that, I mean, granted, the Mariposa de Barrio, that's what the show's called. Um, I was really surprised. Granted, it was on Telemundo, it wasn't on Netflix. How how much. Well, actually, since they dropped it on Netflix, I've seen everyone talking about it.
Mm.
But no, and the stuff like that too. That's what I'm talking about. Like with the Selena stuff, I'm like, we have so many other artists that like people are not acknowledging
Right.
that, and I get it, I mean, when you have it, right? And Selena
Mhm.
definitely has it, which is why I think so many people are drawn to her, like the same thing like Frida. Oh my God, I'm tired of seeing Frida everywhere too.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. And the same thing with J-Lo. Every painting and like drawing that I've seen of Frida looks like Salma Hayek.
Mm.
I don't know if you've seen Frida, where Salma Hayek portrays her,
Yeah.
and Salma Hayek was definitely the beautified version of
Right.
Frida,
Right.
to say the least. And so it's just so funny, how people take that and run, with these particular people, with these particular artists, or things that they do and don't run to. Like there was
Hmm.
such a controversy with that, and I'm like, well, I didn't really see that with the Jenny Rivera story, and
Hmm.
not so much in Texas because we're not big on banda, but I know California is big on banda. I
Yeah.
know Chicago's big on banda. I know Florida's big on banda. Um, so I just thought that was kind of funny how much I've seen about Selena, but I hadn't about um, you know, uh Jenny Rivera. And the same thing, Celia Cruz has a
Hmm.
novela. I've seen that one. Oh my God, I was like stuck to my TV for a month. I didn't want to talk, answer the phone, nothing until I finished it. And Celia Cruz is bigger than both of them
Right.
in historically thinking, I mean, everybody knows Celia Cruz. Everybody knows La Vida es un Carnaval. Everyone knows Azúcar.
Hmm.
Um, so that's why I think it's funny, at the time when everyone's like representation. And I'm like, are you kidding? Like Celia Cruz, Jenny Rivera, they all have
It's
their own
yeah.
shows. And like, what do you mean there's no representation? But I definitely think that they marketed this a lot because they knew that because Selena, I feel like didn't really blow up until a couple years ago
Hmm.
in regards to you seeing her everywhere like you do now. So I think it was definitely advertising because I've seen billboards and stuff for the Selena series.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any billboards for any other Netflix show.
Right.
Um, because I think they knew their audience and they knew that
They definitely
that
did.
was something that I definitely think they knew they could pinpoint an audience and know they were going to get views and know that it was going to be something big for them.
Well, for me personally, I think, and this is what Netflix probably knew, is that I'm part of that Mexican American audience. And so
Mhm.
when you're asking me about like the Jenny Rivera stories, to me, that part, American, that's where it kind of blocks my interest in it, because I did grow up, yeah, I'm Mexican, but I'm just like they mentioned in the Selena movie, you got to sometimes try to be more, was it more Mexican than the Mexicans, more American than the Americans?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, Jenny Rivera grew up in Long Beach.
right,
She
yeah,
wasn't. Her family wasn't from Mexico, but I mean, because it's Texans. Because I've lived in California. I was stationed in Oxnard for 5 years. Not that it was a
okay,
long time, but I definitely was able to see the different vibe from California to Texas. But California is much more Mexican because a lot of the Mexicans there are like first, second generation, and
mhm,
here in Texas we're like third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh.
right,
So I think that's where the whole American Mexican fits in because I've gone to California and they're like, oh dude, you're a gringa, like you barely know Spanish, right? And I'm
mhm,
like, what do
that's
you mean? So I get what you're saying in that sense. Am I surprised? Yes, because being in California was very like I always got shit because I'm like fourth generation American, whereas a lot of people, especially in South California, are first and second kind of
yeah,
thing. But no, I mean granted the her novela is all in Spanish and you just read the
right.
subtitles. But I mean I get what you're saying. That does make sense. But I guess just kind of the same concept that I'm like, it's kind of the same thing. But I get what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's just definitely something I'll check out, but it's not something that jumped at me as much as how I can relate to like Selena and whatnot. But
Right.
it is what it is. Yeah, you said it's marketing, and they know who they're marketing to.
Yeah.
Now, really quickly, I actually wanted to pivot and talk a little bit about your podcast because that's a cool, catchy name. I like that, Chicana Chisme Podcast, right? When did you start it?
I started Chicana Chisme in, I want to say, May of last year,
Okay.
April, May timeframe.
Nice. What did like I started my podcast around the same time. Um, I was honestly just bored as shit during quarantine. I'm like, I need something productive, something fun, something
Mhm.
that'll, I need a like you can't live without, having something you're passionate about doing. Right.
Right,
And so I'm like, if I can make myself do this once a week and I can have fun with it and I can talk to people, I'm not gonna go crazy,
right,
during
definitely.
this quarantine. Uh I don't know if you had those same kind of feelings starting your podcast or if it was just something more that you planned ahead of time.
So I actually had a previous podcast before this one. It was called the Hana Talk, and I had it with two girlfriends. Um, and I ended up just venturing by myself because they both have kids, and one of them has a business. So
Mhm.
me, who's single with no kids, had all the time in the world, whereas they didn't. So we had some scheduling conflicts, and there was a lot of like, well, I can't, or I can't have free time, or I have the kids, or whatever, whatever. And that started from because so I just got back to Texas 3 years ago, and
Mhm.
I was in the Navy for 10 years, active duty, and I'd been everywhere. I was in Chicago. Before I was in Chicago, I was in Cali for 5 years. Before California, I was in Boston,
Mhm.
and a lot of the stuff that I did listen to in regards to podcasts was all from California, or like Miami, New York, and I was like, they're missing a huge, this like such a big scope
Mhm.
from like Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, because there are huge Hispanic communities in both of those areas. Texas, especially. I'm always so surprised that when people hit the Texas marketing because there's a lot of us here.
Mhm.
And so I was kind of like, you know what, I should do a podcast to like represent all of us Texas people. So that's how it started with the girls. And then, once they kind of started falling off, just because, they had other obligations, I was like, let me do this myself. And, there's a lot of stuff that we didn't get to talk about because we all had different ideas. So this time I was able to kind of do the stuff that I had in my head.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I think I noticed you even talk about, things that are interesting and as far as like even food history, right? You had a post about like fajitas and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm like that's cool, that's interesting, it's stuff that you wouldn't really think about.
Yeah, and that's the thing, I always tell people, like, because I'm really big on Mexican American history. I think it's obviously something that we're not taught right in school, and we have so much to offer, especially after like this past crazy freaking 4 years, right? I feel
Hmm.
like we got such a bad rap, but people don't even know how much we contributed to America, how much we contributed to. If it wasn't for Mexicans, there'd be no LA. Who would have built
Hmm.
that shit? I'll wait.
Right.
Let me know. You know what I mean? And like, just like soul food, soul food has became like a what's her name? Um Paula Deen,
Hmm.
like she's this soul food cook. Soul food came from slaves who got the scraps.
Hmm.
You know, they wouldn't have fried chicken. They made that because they had to use what they had resourcefully to make food, and that's literally the same thing with us. That's where fajitas came from. We got the scraps. The farm
Hmm.
workers got the scraps. After the farm owners had their food, and we did what we could with it. And the same thing, like people are like, oh, Tex-Mex, it's not real Mexican food. But what we eat was regional to our area.
Hmm.
We used more flour tortilla than we did corn because, we had more flour than we had corn growing. We used a lot of ground beef because, um, we had more access to a cow than maybe they did in certain areas. So just like different little things like that. And I think it's cool for us to know, how much we contributed, because Americanos love fucking Mexican food,
Yeah.
but they don't love us. You
Right.
know what I'm saying? So I
Exactly.
think it's important for us to know, our stories, and that we're not, murderers and rapists. We're educated, we're smart, we're multidimensional. We're more than, ranch hands and farm workers, which of course there's no shame in that, but that's not all we are either.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's why I wanted to start it, to show different stories, to show that, we are gay, we are transgendered. I've had a couple friends, that have gone over that. We do have people who are served in the military honorably. We do have people who have, that are educated in finances and, work with stocks, just like, the Caucasians do. Different things like that. I feel is very important for us to see ourselves in more of a light than just, what we see on TV, or what we hear ourselves as in the media.
Very cool. I like it. I like the concept. What's maybe one of your most uh, listened to, most talked about, or most controversial topics that you've had on your podcast?
I would definitely say my transgender one.
Mm,
Um, and my friend luckily had a really good story. And I told him, I was like, thank you for letting me explain this one. You know, being gay is a big no, a big taboo topic in the Hispanic community. Not so much anymore. I feel like it's gotten better, but it's definitely like a no topic, right? So
mhm,
being transgender is even like a step up from that.
mhm,
And he had a great story. I feel like whenever you see things on transgender, it's about the bad side, about like how the family didn't accept them, and the family disowned them, and they had to do their own thing and this that. And he was very accepted by his family.
mhm,
He had a great story. He was supportive, and I think it's good to for people to see, especially other Hispanic people who might be in that same situation, that it's not always going to be bad. Your parents are not always going to kick you out. It's not always going to be this story where you have to be worried. There is a positive side that people are going to accept you for exactly who you are.
mhm.
So I thought that was I really liked that episode because and they're in the military. That's how I know them. They're in the military. They were with me. I knew him
Mhm.
when he was her, and I've seen the transition, and so I thought it was a very interesting story to tell.
Mhm.
um and I think I would definitely say that's one of my favorite ones. Oh,
Okay,
I'm sorry.
nice.
Did I blank out real quick?
But your sound was still on, so you're good.
Okay, good.
Yeah. No, I mean, I like that. You're able to include topics like that are kind of taboo, in our culture. I think my most listened to episode was about trauma and abuse, and at the beginning of your podcast, your soundbite in there talks about you talk about the issues that are kind of hush hush. Trauma and abuse is definitely something that's very hush hush.
Yeah,
It's
hundred
very
percent.
prevalent. It is very prevalent in a lot of our households, and a lot of the times, the females in the family are told to kind of shut up about it, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And so I think it was my episode number 15. Mary Eileen, the guest, she had a story about surviving all of that, and she was able to share. And I think a lot of people, you really were able to identify and get a lot out of that. So I tell people that are coming on the podcast all the time, like, yeah, we have a lot of silly haha shit on there, but every now and then we'll have a good, serious episode where we talk about like trauma, abuse, mental health, stuff like that. So, it's kind of like I said, a free form podcast. I don't try to formulate it to be one way or another.
Right.
Yeah. So, what are some things maybe you're looking forward to doing with the podcast, or some guests that people should look out for if any are lined up?
Um, I have a couple things. So in just like I did like the Selena series, I really want to do one on the Jenny Rivera series, because just like how you were saying, she went through a lot. Like she went through domestic abuse. I don't know if you really know Jenny Rivera's story, but the man that she was with, that she has 3 kids by, molested like her little sister. He molested her daughter. She's had issues with her daughter. She like accused her of having an affair with her husband as she got older. And there's so much machista in that story that I'm like, oh my God, this is so many great topics to talk about in regards to like sexual abuse, domestic abuse, machismo in the Hispanic community. So I definitely want to talk about stuff like that.
Mhm.
And I have a couple things lined up. I just did one. My most latest is about financial literacy, which I think is
Mm,
really good. So stuff like that. I really want to do things that is going to help the community. Things they don't talk about. You know, money I think is a big one.
mhm,
So I thought that was good. And I kind of just like take muses where I can. Like I see somebody, you know, things that they have going on that I think would be good to know. And I definitely want to do more history stuff because um, I did during Hispanic Heritage Month, I did like a piece of information every day. And that got
mhm,
really good responses. And I had a lot of people that were like, wow, I didn't know that was our history. So I kind of was like, okay, I need to do more of that too. Cause
mhm,
like I said, I'm pretty knowledgeable in it. And I think that if more people knew how much we've contributed, you know, it might make give people some sense of like a how do you say, like a more sense of pride, you know,
yeah,
to be Mexican American and to not be ashamed and to understand like, hey, this is not this is our country too. You know, we did
right.
A, B, C, and D to, you know, for this to be as great or as not great, whatever you think about this country nowadays, you know, as anyone else did. So I think that's really important. So I'm definitely going to do more of that because I think
Mhm,
it got great responses. And I think it's stuff that unfortunately we are not taught. And I think it's something that more of us should know.
yeah, I like it. I love it. Um, real quick question about the Selena series. Last question I'll ask about that. Right.
Yeah.
Um, I polled people on Instagram and asked, you know, did how many, you know, or did you enjoy the Selena Netflix series? Just because I heard that there'd been a lot of, you know, back and forth. People did like it, didn't like it, right? What percentage of people do you think enjoyed the series? That those that answered the poll.
Um, Man, from what I got, it was like I feel like more people disliked it than liked it. For kind of the same reasons I did, and I think the people who disliked it didn't even watch it to say that
Mhm.
they actually didn't like it or not. So I would probably say there was more people who said that they disliked it.
So you say like what percent?
I would say maybe like 70-30
70 that
people who
didn't
liked
like
it,
it.
who didn't like it. Yeah, no,
Who did like it? 70.
who actually watched it and did like it. Yeah,
You hit it right on the nose right there, actually. It was about
really.
72%. Yeah. I was surprised because I thought a lot of people would be like, no, I didn't like it. You know, I'm all gung ho about the movie and not so much the series, but people enjoyed it, you know. I think there's still a place for that, you know. Maybe the just let her stay, you know, let her rest in peace, you know, that whole thought we talked about earlier. Maybe not yet. You know, maybe people
Yeah,
still.
no, I definitely understand why people wanted to see it. You know, my reasoning behind it are, you know, probably way deeper than necessary. In all honesty, you know, I'm probably thinking way too much into it.
Uh,
But I mean, I like I said before, I totally understand why, you know, people want to know why they want to see it. You know, just me personally, those are my personal issues with it.
for sure. Yeah. All right. Well, I definitely, you know, thank you for coming on. I thought it was a pretty cool conversation. What I want you to do, if you have any, you know, social media you want to put out there where people can find you, you know, really throw everything out there so you know people can listen to your podcast, or maybe if they're in the Texas area can listen to your show. Throw it all out there.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So, Chicana Chisme Podcast is my Instagram as well as my Facebook. My radio station is Tori underscore E989. And that's for my radio station for the Tejano, as well as I just got a TikTok. So I've been putting everything on the TikTok, my podcast stuff and the radio. And I do have a personal one. If you can find me, find me. If not, that one's more of a personal one. But I do try to post as much as I can on, you know, my podcast as well as the radio one. So other than that, I mean, those two, you can find me on any of the social media that I do have. And But yeah, I'm on all platforms, from Amazon to Google to Spotify and Apple and everything in between.
Nice.
But yeah, I just want to thank you, Fabian, for having me on. I appreciate you, being curious in what I had to say. So I appreciate you taking the time to interview me.
Definitely. All right. For everybody listening at home, I appreciate it. Thank you. Fuck you and good night.
Wait, what?
Subscribe to the Ignorance is Strength podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Like, follow, and share on Facebook and Instagram at Ignorance is Strength Podcast and on Twitter at The Ignorance Pod.